Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. Thank you for wanting to have a chat. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, I mean, I read your biography and your kind of backstory, so it's obviously there's a lot to talk about. Um, First of all, the new single's out. It's really enjoyed it. It's also a very personal subject for you. Was it scary putting it out there for the world to hear?
Yeah, I think on like multiple levels, just as a human and an artist, putting out something you've worked on really hard and putting it out into the world. And I mean, you don't want to value your work based on other people's reactions, but of course, there's like a little bit of that voice in your head.
Yeah,
So there's like aspects of that. And also because it's about my experience with adoption and being transracially adopted. And yeah, so getting that out there and speaking about that for the first time added a whole lovely new layer of fear into releasing music.
I
Yeah.
mean, what was the reaction like from people that have heard it? If you had people contact you about it, about especially about the theme?
Yeah. So there have been people who are just like music lovers who have really liked it and have reached out, which is just for like my singer and songwriter self, really lovely to hear. But there's been other TRAs, transracial adoptees, who have reached out and who've participated in the project with me.
Right.
Um, yeah, who've written me like the most beautiful, lovely, thoughtful messages on what it was like having their experience mirrored back to them in a musical way for the first time.
Yeah.
That's that feels huge to me. Yeah, that was really amazing.
Okay. I mean, in terms of the going forward, the tracks taken from your upcoming EP. Um, Obviously, it's about your birth mother and that obviously aspect of your life. What about the rest of the songs on the EP? Do they follow a similar theme?
Yeah, so I knew going into this one song would have to be kind of to and for my birth mother, which is Seamstress, but every song on the EP touches on a different subject, I guess. The first song, for example, it's already out. It's called Gentle, and I really needed to write a song of self-love, and I knew I was going to have to kind of apply new boundaries for myself going through this process, and so it's kind of just putting me on the right path
Yeah.
and showing up for myself in a way I haven't before. And I think a lot of adoptees struggle with that, and they struggle with boundaries and people pleasing for fear of
Right.
abandonment or, a plethora of reasons. So yeah, each song really kind of focuses on a different subject.
Okay. I mean, just one of the things I've read about you is you've said one of the key things for you was always trying to track down your birth family. I
Yeah.
mean, even going up to doing the DNA test, was there any apprehension about what you'd discover? Because
Oh,
it's a life changing.
oh, completely,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, it was as equal fear and excitement.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just something else. Yeah. Um, I for sure always wanted to know who I was. I was a bit racially ambiguous growing up, and the question of what are you? What are you? What are you?
Yeah.
Like, no matter where I was on the planet, or everybody thought I was one of them, or yeah. So part of it was wanting to know like my genealogy, like my heritage,
Yeah.
and then the other part, finding my birth family. So the reunion process, if you have a reunion at all, is so many things all at once. It can be beautiful and lovely and immensely sad and or hurtful. And it's kind of been a bit of all those things for me. I think
Okay.
it's like that for a lot of people who go through it. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, at what point then did you decide, this is a subject I want to discuss through my music, or I want to kind of transcribe into my music?
I usually don't have like an answer like this, but I had this like being struck by lightning moment. I was in Berlin, um, and for people who aren't musicians, like going on writing sessions, you kind of walk into these studios and you sit down and you're supposed to write a song with a stranger. And most of the time, they're like white males who run the studio who know nothing about adoption or me, and they hear my voice, which is somewhat soulful, and they're like, we're going to make like a full-on like soul R&B radio hit. And I mean, you've heard Seamstress, it's not exactly
Yeah.
what I do. So there's this whole kind of like mathematical way to writing songs, and it's really not what, it's like a total skill set and very impressive. It's just not what resonates with me,
Yeah.
So I was on like a 5-day run, and every day I would go in and it'd be a different stranger, and I kind of wouldn't be heard and would be talked over, and my references would be kind of ignored. And I kept making these songs that I would never use.
Right.
And then on the last day, feeling really tired and really depleted and probably somewhat more vulnerable because of that, I walked into the studio and there was a queer woman of color as a producer. And I'm like, oh my God, where have you been? And I don't know, somehow we started talking about this, and I had just gotten the results back from my DNA test and had found a first birth cousin and who contacted her uncle, who contacted my birth mother. And she responded kind of like in my worst nightmare kind of way, like, yeah, didn't even want to acknowledge my existence. And I was somewhat of like a shameful, dirty thing, you know,
Right.
for her. And I mean, I think that's kind of devastating for anybody,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah. And so I was like talking about all these things, and I never talk about these things. And I looked up and this producer was like bawling her eyes out and was just kind of like soaking up what I was saying. And I was like, oh, I think I've like hit this chord like in myself. And that's like, you know, projected outward. And in that moment, the name I used to be Sam came to be. Samantha was my birth name. And it was just like really this like aha moment of like, this is art I need to be making. This is the sound I need to be making. This is like the art I've needed to be making to kind of grow personally, where I've felt stuck.
I mean, how did it feel, just what, like you said, walking into that room and just having somebody that you just connected with, or just, I don't want to say got what you were about, but got your emotion and what you were going through? How did that feel? And you talked about it being an aha moment.
Yeah, it was. I guess I was almost kind of somewhat removed, like disassociating talking about this in some ways. And being in a studio and just having somebody really hear me, like truly hear me and like value what I was saying, I felt, yeah, really grateful. It felt really good. Yeah.
Okay. On that note, then, I mean, one of the things we touched on at the beginning was people getting in touch with you about the single and how it meant to them. But if people read your story and kind of delve into your music and what it's about and what inspires you, what do you hope they take away from it? Because it is a hugely personal subject that obviously, like you said, not everybody goes through. I mean, what do you hope they take away from it?
For people who are connected to the adoptee community, if they're adopted themselves or transracial, the message is, I see you.
Yeah.
I fully see you. And like, this is for you as much as it is for me, you know? And for kind of everybody else who's curious about it or just likes the music, which is also totally fine. Yeah, I guess that there's so much more to learn on this topic, like in the language that we use, in the jokes that we tell, in kind of highly unrealistic narrative of adoption that you see in films or talk shows, or these like happy reunions, or that's it's just a very it's like a savior. The adopters are the saviors and we're completing our family, and none of it is really child-based or birth family based, and supporting that community and the birth family to begin with, to not even have to give their kid up for adoption. And there's so many layers. And I think, I just want them to take away that there's more to learn on this, and to be gentle with those in the community.
Okay, that leads into my next question. You've talked about the TRA community. When you started to get involved in that, I mean, what's the most valuable thing you've learned from it? And what's the most surprising thing you've learned from it?
Yeah. The most important thing is that they exist and they're out there and they're reaching out to one another and sharing stories. This was huge for me. It didn't even occur to me to like look online for like adoption groups, because I think adoption can be a really like lonely existence. There's a lot of like shame and taboo about adoption, and it's not something I like broadcasted to the world, you know? I mean, it's like obvious when you see my brother and me and my family, but it's not something I talked about a lot. So the fact that they were just there and they're holding space for one another and like doing incredible work, educating themselves and other people and like prospective people who want to adopt. And and the most surprising thing that I learned for me on my own journey was that I'm allowed to be angry about some things. Like my feelings are valid, and I can still totally love my adoptive family, and I'm allowed to be angry at like the trauma that some of their ignorance caused, you know? This was huge for me, and it also created movement that needed to happen.
Okay. I mean, when you started to kind of I don't want to say open up about it, but when you started to use your music to, did it change any of your views or any of your kind of thoughts? Did any of that change?
Yeah, I think a lot of it did. I think, like most people, my knowledge of adoption, other than my own kind of like soul experience, was what I saw mirrored back to me in Annie the musical, and all these kind of absurd adoption stories. So all these kind of feelings that were somewhat hidden or not at the surface were really validated.
Mm.
And that was huge for me. And I'm hoping to do that for other people also if they want it or need it. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, in terms of looking forward, then obviously the EP is coming out. Is it something you're going to continue writing about?
Yeah, I think absolutely it is. There'll probably be another, I guess, EP that's like very adoption like specific like this, because I feel like this initial EP is just my like first feelings of all
Right.
this, and kind of like getting the DNA test, connecting with some birth family, being really rejected by some birth family. And it was kind of just like I purged out my emotions,
Yeah.
into this EP. And I think the next one will go into a bit more specifics. I'm a bit more educated on it now, and I hope to continue educating myself on adoption. And then I think after that, it'll be in my art in a way like consistently that it hasn't before, because adoption affects every aspect of my life. It affects like my fears and anxiety and my relationships that I'm in. And yeah, so I think that's going to be really interesting to kind of dive into that and check it out.
Okay. I mean, just relating to that, obviously it was a whole new experience writing about this. Having gone through writing about it and putting it on out to the world, do you think you'll approach writing future material differently?
Um, yeah, maybe this EP that I wrote was much more kind of therapy based in
Yeah.
studio sessions with this awesome producer, and we would just have these conversations. It wasn't like, what's the hook gonna be, it
Yeah.
was like, what catchy lyric rhymes with this. It was just like, this is this feeling, this is what I'm experiencing, how can I like sonically communicate this as honestly and clearly as possible.
Yeah.
And that was a really lovely and patient way to write, and so I would love to keep exploring that. Yeah.
Okay, just to finish off then, I mean, just for somebody that going back as is starting out on a journey that you've gone through, um, in the whole adoption thing, I mean, what advice would you give them?
Yeah. I would say be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself in a way that you're usually only kind to your friends. We're like better friends to everybody else except ourselves.
Yeah.
Create the boundaries that you need, and whatever they are, it's okay. And it can be different than another adoptive person.
Yeah.
And even if the non-adoptees in your life don't understand it, that's not the priority. I would say reach out to other people online. The community is so loving and open, and people are willing to talk and share. You're like not alone.
Yeah.
So yeah, be patient, be loving, be gentle with yourself. Yeah.
Just in terms, and what are your plans for the project? I mean, do you plan on playing the songs live? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? And
Yeah. I mean, I'm equally terrified of playing live as I am addicted to it. It's like a combination of debilitating stage fright, and I will just shrivel if I don't do this.
yeah,
It's great, it's super healthy. So yeah, September 17th, I'm gonna have like a big EP release show, and I'm gonna do it with a choir. So they're gonna sing all
wow,
the vocal parts that I've written for this EP. I'm so excited.
that's going to be incredible.
Yeah, I'm really so. If you're in Basel in September, come check it out.
That's two reasons to go to Basel now.
Yeah. So, and there's going to be other live shows also kind of sprinkled throughout, and then hopefully next year we're going to push that a little bit more. Yeah.
Perfect, brilliant. Well, that's pretty much everything covered. I just want to say good luck with everything, and I mean, not just on a musical level, just on your whole life and
Thank
where
you.
it goes from here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening and being interested and supporting. That's super awesome.
No,
Thanks.
no problem. No problem. Well, thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.